been sounding the alarm on the First Amendment for years. I did a couple of extensive, or at least prescient, predictive blogs in the beginning of January of 2017. In 2016, I talked about the next president would be the censorship president. Obama was the surveillance president. It's absolutely panning out. And but just more generally about the First Amendment, I had a couple of quick points, but here is what it says. I always say the First Amendment is first for a reason. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. I have two big points here. One is that it is very clear in that amendment, unlike any other amendment, that it refers to Congress making laws. But I believe, I'd have to refresh my memory on this, but I think the 14th Amendment is read as incorporating the Bill of Rights into state law. So states prior could do this, but the Congress could not. Okay. So when you wanted to put the 10 commandments, or somebody wanted to put the 10 commandments on town hall and the entire town voted for it, everybody wanted it, Supreme Court says the First Amendment prohibits that. I disagree with that. I think that's overreading it. I don't even know if the 14th Amendment can be rightly thought of on its face to incorporate that stuff. However, so I do think it's generally overread, but I will say the Corona times, which I think are, if not created, at least exploited for the benefit of the globalists, they have, I would say, violated every single one of these tenets, because really I can't go to my church, but I can go to my grocery store.
Right.
I cannot, the censorship, I believe that's why I was taken off of WSB, is that there was this thing, Event 201, that foreshadowed this entire Corona Times thing. And one of the number one recommendations they said was that you had to control the media. And anyone who said anything that wasn't part of the narrative should be taken down. And even the representative from Singapore said, how about arresting them? So that's where we're headed. And then the right of people to assemble, completely abridged. The only protesters that are out there are maybe protesting the cops and everything locally, but I wanted to protest these unconstitutional laws that they're passing in Congress right now. And I can't go down there, and we can't assemble.
They're protesting right now. Why can't you? I don't understand. The people are protesting right now, all over the place.
Well, I can reapply for a permit in DC, but there was one time when you couldn't.
I guess my question is, have permits been filled out for the dozens of protests going around the country right now?
No, they absolutely have not. And I don't think that you should have a permit for protesting. It's clear that they can't prohibit it. But I'm just saying,
that was facetious.
Yeah, no, I know, but like, I understand. But I'm just saying, for a while, it was not okay to get together en masse to protest at Capitol Hill. The restrictions they have on it already are uncool, but this is getting excessive. Yet at the same time, they continue to legislate. So I just think the First Amendment has been completely gutted. I predicted that it would happen under this president, and it is absolutely happening.
Okay, so I agree with you that you should not be able to legislate if we don't have a voice. Second, I think if you can't say who can protest without a permit, if you're going to make everybody have a permit, everybody should have a permit. If not, it's illegal. Everybody should be able to do it like that, like you said. But the other side of the coin is, golly, I had a good point and I completely lost it, because you were just saying, what did you just say?
Because I said I predicted this president would do it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So do you think it would be different if we had Hillary?
No, I actually wrote the article thinking Hillary was going to win. I called teeing it up for the censorship president. And I talked about articles that were in the newspaper. I included Melania Trump, but also Vern Jordan saying, and Trump and Obama saying, we need a truthiness standard. We need to bring Walter Cronkite back. We need someone to curate the news. Melania came out and said, we need to limit online bullying. It needs to be a safe and friendly environment. They were all talking about that in 2016 before the election. And that's when I wrote my article. And boy, was that ahead of the game. I wrote a few articles.
I promised that we were going to get into the Second Amendment. Are you
Right
ready?
on. Yeah.
Okay, you say you've got some unique stuff, and I've got 2 surprise questions today that I think are going to change it up a little bit. But let's start with this. What in the world have they done with my Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam? They took their guns away. What are they doing?
Dude, I had an argument. Someone was saying how totally racist, like Speedy Gonzalez and his lazy cousin were. And it's like, Yosemite Sam is a very stereotypical, ridiculous character. Elmer Fudd. Why not leave them with their guns and make the guns make them look more ridiculous? If you don't like guns,
that's what cartoons are, though. Cartoons are.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Scooby Doo, dogs don't talk.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. That's what the purpose is. But with that being said, that's called a segue. And hello, Franny. How is everybody doing?
Hi, Franny.
You said you had some cool stuff. We've been doing over a different amendment every week. I think so far we've talked about the 10th, the 1st, and I want to say the 3rd or 4th. I can't remember. But
No,
today,
just the 10th and the 1st.
Okay, just the 10th and the 1st. I'm glad you're remembering. How about the 2nd? What you got on the 2nd today?
I'm going to give you the 2nd. And
Yes.
I have gotten a lot of flack on Twitter for what I've said about the Second Amendment, because the talking points are so well established that you're not allowed to say anything that isn't exactly what they want you to say. So, of course, I'm going to read it to you, as I always do. And the words are always important. There's always something you did not realize. You always have to read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights first, yourself. So the Second Amendment is a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, capital S in state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So people on this is, so I always say, don't forget the first part of that. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. And gun rights advocates get mad at me because liberals have picked up on that, or gun control advocates have picked up on that, to say that there are no militias, therefore there should be the gun rights. The Second Amendment isn't what you say it is. The Second Amendment is for the militia. So when I say, don't forget about the militia in the Second Amendment, people on the right are annoyed because they think I'm playing into the argument of the left. And it's slightly more complex than that, in that what this presupposes is that there are militias. And I would argue that it's unconstitutional that we no longer have militias. And that is the answer to our problems with the Supreme Court, with unconstitutional law, with federal law enforcement. All of these things would not be encroaching on our rights if we had militias. So the Supreme Court decides when congressional law is unconstitutional. I completely object to that. I want to overturn Marbury versus Madison. I don't think it's not in the Constitution. That role for the Supreme Court is not in the Constitution. Why? Because Congress has no ability to enforce its laws on the states. The states have to voluntarily enforce those laws the way the Constitution is written. But they took away the militias after the Civil War, and they implemented the Department of Justice after the Civil War so that they could push down unconstitutional law on states that didn't want it. And so you have to get rid of the militia if you're going to do that. And now we have this thing where we're just beholden to the Supreme Court for them to tell us that the laws are okay, and the feds will come in and enforce those. And then you've got the same problem with the National Guard coming in and raising the bar on having to enforce these zones. Trump's like, I'm going to send the National Guard in. And now we have this movement towards nationalizing the police. And I think it all comes down to us not having militias, which are in fact required for a free state.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the police and the federalizing of the police here later on in the show. Real quick, shout out to David Guffey. Thanks for the Father's Day wishes, David. Happy Father's Day to you too, buddy. Thank you for jumping on with us. You said a couple things, and I always I'll read, because I try not to get on these social media debates because I'm not you, and I just don't have that kind of time, and I get frustrated a little bit. But, first of all, they say, the forefathers never intended us to have, AR-15 type guns. And I think to myself, I don't know, back in the day, we were allowed to have the highest technology. We were allowed to have the same thing as the military had if we wanted it back when we, as they developed this. If the musket was the best weapon of choice and we could afford it, we could have a musket. So
and there was no standing army, so you had to have the militia was the best armed.
Right.
The militia was the best armed. And in Switzerland, they require the citizens, because they have a militia, they require the citizens to be armed, real hardcore.
When I worked back in radio the first time through back in the mid 90s to 2004, I had several friends that were, of course, they were Second Amendment advocates, but they were also part of a militia. The problem they had trying to go mainstream is they were good people. They weren't racist. They weren't anything. They were just believed in the Second Amendment and they believed in the Constitution. Is the stigma that came along with once you tell someone you are part of a militia, that is such a heavy bag to pick up and carry that by the time somebody can filter out that, oh, it doesn't mean this and it doesn't mean that and it doesn't mean this, and you're a good person, you've lost a reputation is just shot.
I have a few things to say about that.
Yes,
First of all, they were supposed to repel invasion, so it would have to be the biggest guns around. There was not supposed to be a standing army. Two things happened to make a militia censured like that. This Oklahoma City made that whole era. The FBI really infiltrated the militia movements, made them look like they were domestic terrorists. Now they have this thing, which I also think is AstroTurf, whatever, a created event or movement, the Boogaloo. Plenty of people really buy it. It's about taking back the country or overthrowing the government or whatever, but it's giving libertarians a bad name, militia a bad name. And let me tell you, when I looked up, the militia must be a real threat. When I looked up today to see before our conversation, because I knew you wanted to talk about the Second Amendment, just to make sure I knew all the nuances of the militia issue. And I said, why is a militia? I Googled, why is a militia essential for a free state? And normally you would get like the Constitution Center or some university would explain the background to you. The top thing above your search results, the thing that was highlighted, which is normally reserved for Wikipedia or whatever, said, this is it. Why are militias necessary to the security of a free state? Militias were essential to effectuate the country's goal of seizing the American continent and establishing a white-led capitalist state. The government couldn't violently expropriate that territory all on its own, so it authorized its citizens to do it for them. That is the number one result for why is a militia important for a free state. So it's being framed in this day when this week, this month, these years, when being a racist is the one thing that is absolutely discredits everything you believe in. If they can hang that label on anything, it is going to discredit. So I think the people who are hanging this label on the militia are the people who don't want the militia, which is the government, the state. They don't want it. It's a threat to them. So they're hijacking the racist idea. And I'm not saying that the founding of our country didn't obviously have racist elements, from slavery to colonization to taking the land away from American Indians. I get that. But I'm saying this is there for something to discredit the militia, which is a really constitutional necessity, in my opinion.
The problem we're running into, and directly in response to that, the problem we're running into is it doesn't matter if it's the police department, politics. It doesn't matter if it's a scientist, militia. We've said this 1,000 times. Once human beings get involved in any organization, it has the potential to get corrupted unless the people involved check themselves, because that is human nature. If you get 100 people in a room, there's going to be a percentage that do not have good intent on their heart, and they can take a movement over if everybody just stands back and let them. And then everybody's judged like that. And that's not the reality. I
would say that actually happens in every single organization, including the government, which is why I think that the concept of a self-limiting government is the utopian fantasy and not the concept. Yes, I would like Franny to please look that up for me, because last time I looked it up, I did not see that. I did not see
let's read it real quick.
States that have militias. Oh, sorry. Do any states have militias currently is Franny's question.
Yeah, well, let's look it up. We'll figure that one out. Also, when you searched why is militia important, you searched it on Google, didn't you? Did you search that?
Yeah.
I just looked it up through Bing and got a different result. So,
and I'm sure DuckDuckGo would too. Yeah.
Isn't that
and
odd?
Google was established by the NSA. So
well, the Bing is the militia of the revolution, is played a vital role in the independence, America's independence. It doesn't go down the racist path at all.
Yeah, and I'm saying I don't even think it's like Black Lives Matters hijacked Google. I think Google in this case is hijacking that message because they are the NSA and they are there to make sure the narrative stays in the lane. And that is that militias are bad, whatever you want to call them. They can be domestic terrorists. They can be white nationalists, whatever it is that you have to call them to make sure that people don't want, I mean, states' rights themselves, of course, because that was an essential part of the Civil War, are painted with the brush of being exclusively racist. But like with everything good in our country's history, it is tainted by that history. But to throw the baby out with the bathwater hurts everybody.
That's what I'm saying. Just because it's labeled something on Google does not mean that is all the truth or the truth or the most of the truth. So when you go to Bing, you get a completely different answer. And to be honest with you, I've started doing that a lot. I've started going to other search engines just to get a counter to make sure that, because Google's not the Google. It's not the, Google needs to be Googled somewhere else sometimes.
Yeah, I try to use DuckDuckGo. It has
Say it again. What is it?
DuckDuckGo. I've been using DuckDuckGo for years and years and years, but its tech isn't as good. So like I can't share from it on my phone, for example. So I got out of the habit of using it.
15 minutes in, I'm not told anybody, we've not given you the opportunity to tell everybody how to find your stuff.
And you have to do the same thing.
Well, you go first. Let's go. Let's hit it.
Okay. I'm Monica Perez. You can find me on Twitter night and day, 24/7 at Monica Perez Show. But you can also find my podcast at the Propaganda Report feed on any podcasting platform. My website is thepropreport.com. And mostly you would be interested in our flagship show. My co-host Brad Binkley and I do a show every single day, which is every single weekday, called the Drive Time News Blast. It's 30 minutes of news of the day from a perspective of truth, liberty, and justice. And if you want 15 extra minutes, you can become a patron on patreon.com/propaganda report. And we also do really fun live cocktail parties basically every other Friday for patrons. So it's a really great little community we have going.
All right, Monica, there's the question. Tell me about the 10th Amendment and how it's relevant today.
Well, 10th Amendment is my favorite amendment, although I love all of the amendments in the Bill of Rights.
But you refer to it a lot.
Yes, I do. And I always thought if I was going to not do podcasts, I might go work for the 10th Amendment Center because they're about restoring it. I always have my Constitution next to me. I have several copies. This is not my super marked up one, but you've seen that one. So I'll just read the amendment real quick. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. There's 18 enumerated powers in the Constitution, yada, yada. Basically, anything that's not in the Constitution is the purview of the states. Included in that through adjudication, it's been clear, Supreme Court, that the police powers, it's called the police powers, but it includes everything from education to welfare to policing to health. Everything that regulates that kind of stuff or pertains to that kind of stuff is squarely, unequivocally in the realm of the states. We now, when you hear them saying, Bill Barr, whoever say, the rioters are from other states, as if like the ones in Boston go to Connecticut, the one in Connecticut go to New York, the one in New York go to New Jersey. What does that do? It gives the feds a right to go in there and interfere. Same thing with gun control. If you can say it's a cross-border thing, they're going to say they have the right to do it. And I think that's why they're doing it. I think they want a federal police force. They want to get past all this. But for me, the 10th Amendment would solve everyone's problems for everything if they would just restore it. When I was saying that with Obama, just restore the 10th Amendment and you can have Obama do whatever you want. Then the same people who loved Obama hate Trump. And my answer to them was just restore the 10th Amendment. That California doesn't have to secede because they hate Trump, and they don't have to look to the UN for an international police force, which is what I'm afraid of. Okay. Is that they will all they need to do is restore the 10th Amendment. There are countries smaller than California California and New York as far as population goes. If they want to have a complete welfare state, they could have it. They could have complete transfer of wealth. They are beyond any kind of critical mass that is right now at work in socialist countries. So why do they have to have the whole entire multi-regional 50-state complex? It's just a matter of control and globalization.